the railroad tracks into Birkenau, which brought all those poor people through that gate to the work camp of Birkenau, which held 150,000, and there was ovens where they were exterminated.
Here, and it is a historical novel, but in night there's Eleazar, who's a Jewish teenager, and he's a devoted student of the Talmud. He is from Hungarian Transylvania, and in the spring of 1944 the Nazis occupy Hungary, and the Jews of Eleazar's hometown are forced into ghettos, and that ghetto's broken up and they're shipped off to the death camps of Birkenau and Auschwitz. And throughout the novel, Eleazar is reflecting on the nature of God. He's looking at the atrocities all around him. And in the fourth chapter, there's an especially powerful scene that I have remembered all these years. He describes the execution of 3 Jews, 2 men and a young child. And I'll read from it. He says, "One day," and this is Elie Wiesel in the voice of Eleazar, "one day as we returned from work, we saw 3 gallows erected on the plaza. Roll call. The SS surrounding us, machine guns aimed at us. It was the usual ritual. 3 prisoners in chains, and among them the little Pipel, the sad-eyed angel of a little boy. The SS seemed more preoccupied, more worried than usual. To hang a child in front of thousands of onlookers was not a small matter. The head of the camp read the verdict, and all eyes were on the child. He was pale, almost calm, but he was biting his lips as he stood in the shadow of the gallows. This time, the head of the camp refused to act as executioner. The 3 SS took his place. They took the 3 condemned prisoners together, had them step up onto chairs, and in unison, the nooses were placed around their necks. 'Long live liberty,' shouted the men. The boy was silent. And from the background, I could hear somebody say, 'Where is the merciful God? Where is he?' At the signal, the 3 chairs were tipped over, the nooses tightened, and the 3 fell, snapping their necks, with the exception of the boy. There was total silence in the camp, and on the horizon the sun was setting. We were weeping, and we marched past the victims. The 2 men were no longer alive. Their tongues were hanging out, swollen and bluish. But the 3rd rope was still moving. The child, too light to snap his neck, was still breathing. And so he remained drifting in the air, not yet dead. His tongue was still red, and you could see life in his eyes. And so he remained for more than half an hour, lingering between life and death, writhing before our eyes, and we were forced to look at him at close range. Behind me, I heard the same man asking, 'For God's sake, have mercy! Where is God?' And from within himself, Eleazar felt and heard a voice rising to answer, 'Where is he? This is where, hanging here from this gallows.'" Now, I don't know what Elie Wiesel intended from the passage. I don't know what he intended it to mean. But I remember the first time reading it and saying, "You're right. You're absolutely right. That's where God is, hanging in front of us." There were here 3 executions. One of them was an innocent, a Jew killed by agents of the state. Where is God? Well, God's not immediately obvious, but for those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, Jesus is there crying out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The death of God is only apparent. My God, why have you forsaken me?" is not the final word. And as difficult as it is to believe when confronted with the apparent senselessness of this violence and with the apparent absence of God, we can look at the horror that Elie Wiesel is detailing in Night and actually see God hanging there with us. Catholics don't have an answer, per se, to the problem of evil in the sense that we can claim so many units of suffering leads to so many units of blessing. We don't have an answer that way, but we have an assurance that God, in a sense, is here with us, very much committed to this human project, no matter how chaotic and evil it may seem. He isn't taken by surprises. He's invested in this world of suffering that so often confounds our best efforts. Where is God? Well, he can be seen at the front of almost every Catholic church, hanging on a cross, and also there as the Eucharistic Lord. And as Catholics, I think we need to remember, even among fellow Christians, there's no other tradition that is so realistic and clear-eyed about the presence of evil. God is with us. He's hanging there with us. And he works his redemption through that. So that's it. Read Night by Elie Wiesel.
What are your reactions to having seen Auschwitz for the first time, El? What's your reaction?
The size of it, and Birkenau is even bigger, but it's just the size of this industrial strength execution. It's hard to believe that I have a friend of Steve's too, Stan Williams, who's doing a movie called When We Were Gods, and it's about the life of the Auschwitz commandant Rudolf Hess and his family, and how he reacted to the death of Maximilian Kolbe. And in fact, I've got the script with me. I'm going to read it on the way home. His wife believed she was living in paradise. And what can you say? How do you have paradise on the outskirts of hell like that? I think it's the massive size of it, and you always, it's funny, it's where you pitch yourself when you're walking through there. Do you see yourself as one of the victims, or do you see yourself as one of the perpetrators? And I guess in my mind, I see myself as one of the Nazis, asking myself, how the heck am I doing this? And I think that was just overwhelming. It's like having a monkey on your back while you're there.
And it's obvious they knew they were morally wrong, because as soon as the Allied forces got close, they tried to dismantle and cover their tracks.
That is right.
Because they did not want the world to see the atrocities they did, because they knew in their hearts that what they did was evil.
I am interested to know. I mean, this is when people talk about evil in the modern world, the Holocaust is the example. If you talk about evil leadership in the modern world, it's Hitler or Stalin, right? We don't believe in Satan, but we believe in Hitler and Stalin. And we don't believe in hell, but we believe in the Holocaust. And I really wonder if the next generation following us, two generations removed from the generation that liberated Auschwitz and Birkenau, I just wonder if that next generation is going to look back on this example of evil, or if they'll have something similar that will take their place. Perhaps the abortion Holocaust, I don't know. But that's also been on my mind too here.
When I saw those ovens, I saw babies being put on there and shoved in. That's the American form of the Holocaust.
The hardness of heart. There's an interesting story about Hermann Goering, just as he was watching film of the execution of Polish people by the Einsatzgruppen, and he's watching it, and he's saying to himself, "Be hard, my heart, be hard." They knew they had a nerve of conscience that had to be deadened in order to, quote, be strong, is what he's saying. Be strong in the execution of evil. But that required a hardened heart, the inability to experience empathy.
One of the reasons that the Jews do not like Christianity, and if you go down to the Western Wall with a cross on, they'll be very upset. I've experienced it when I did my movie on St. Paul. But they believe that they were slaughtered by the Christian West. Christian Europe killed them. It was the name of Jesus that caused them to die. Obviously, we know that Hitler was not a Christian, that he wasn't a practicing Christian, but they view it as Christian West, the Western Europe. The Christians of Western Europe are the one that caused the Holocaust.
Father Robert, could you come here? You had some good things to say. Elie Wiesel is somebody you've studied.
And we are going to be able to go in, by the way. They're letting people in.
I just thought it'd be good to have Father Robert share some of the things he shared with me this morning.
We got 5 or 10 minutes.
You can get those. I'm trying to get rid of this thing. I don't know how I got it here. There you go.
Well, what we were talking about was redemptive suffering, and how there is no explanation for evil, and there's no solution to evil except on the cross, and the Catholic understanding of I guess one of the most horrible things of Auschwitz or Birkenau is to think that the death of those people is meaningless. And if I were there, tricked into walking into those showers that were actually, I was about to be gassed, and then realized what was happening, without an understanding of the cross and the Catholic understanding that our suffering is somehow transformed through the cross, I would feel unspeakable despair. Like I've been tricked into death and that was the end. And it's because we have the cross and because we have the Catholic understanding that our suffering, whatever it is, it's not that heinous, but we all suffer disease and death ultimately. But it's given meaning through what Jesus did on the cross. And we are not forsaken because Jesus went all the way. And that makes all the difference in the world.
Amen. Paul says in Colossians, Paul says that I fill up in my body the sufferings that are lacking in the sufferings of Christ. And as an evangelical, there's no possible way to grapple with that passage. What could be lacking in the sufferings of Christ? He said it's finished. Everything is finished. Nothing we can add to that. But Paul says, I fill up in my body the sufferings which is lacking in the sufferings of Christ.
And that was a struggle for Scott Hahn. He talks about how that was, the exegesis of that passage was a key for him in taking him out of Presbyterianism into the Catholic Church.
And as a Protestant, it's best just not to try to exegete that problem. That's what they make scissors for.
Don't preach on it.
Yeah, don't preach on that
avoid it.
passage. Okay, let's go in because it is open and there's an opening now. So let's go.
Now we divide the group.
We are.
Yellow bus and blue bus.
Okay, we are. Yeah, absolutely.
Yellow bus and blue bus.
Yellow bus and blue bus.